right, guys, the UFC dog days are over. This weekend, we have a crazy card that is going to deliver on so many levels. And there's only one man that I want in this show to preview it and break it all down for me. Hey, I'm just going to say it right now. This person is absolutely killing it on Substack. One of the greatest new additions to the MMA media industry. Of course, you know him from his live chat, Morning Combat, the pre-games, everything he touches, it turns to gold. LT, welcome to Submission. What an exciting time to be an MMA fan right now, right? We got a big card coming up finally.
314 is a card that's very hard to complain about. I'll say it that way for sure.
I'll tell you what, man, before we get into it, I know you and BC, you guys brought up this whole UFC having a star problem discussion that all of us have been talking about across all the different outlets and media. And it's really sort of taken off where people have been discussing it. But one of the things I wanted to get from you first is, what do you make about the sort of drop-off from fans over the last number of weeks? And I guess from my end and a lot of other friends in the media industry talking about, look, less views, less people clicking on articles, less traffic. We had UFC London, which many people felt like could sort of excite people. We had Mexico happen, which was also a pretty cool main event there with Brendan Moreno. But it feels like people have been largely tuned out of MMA since the Alex Pereira loss against Ankalaev.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is going to experience this differently. And I have experienced this kind of moment a little differently as well. In the sense that, to me, the thing is, it just seems like Poatan losing, and then, you know, the London card had a bunch of like weird fights where a lot of the hometown guys lost. Obviously, Leon got like waxed, and you know, it's more than just that. Like, you know, obviously, endless Apex nights seems to have contributed as well. But this is like a malaise I've been feeling, for quite some time. But I also have a job in this industry, so I have a kind of a responsibility to, you know, I think at the same time observe some of these larger trends. And at the same time, got to get ready for the fights, right? So it's this kind of like both, and I don't feel it quite as acutely as everyone else in that way. At least I didn't feel it as acutely at this particular chapter. I was actually talking to our mutual friend Oscar Willis about this, and he was asking, like, you know, have you felt this kind of thing and blah 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 at this time? And I'm like, I've been feeling it for quite some time. It seems like it definitely got more pronounced more recently. I mean, I'm of a couple of minds on this one. Mm-hmm. The first is that there's just no doubt in my mind, if you grew up watching MMA, or at least I should say, if you became an MMA fan at a bare minimum when they were in the Brock Lesnar, you know, even before that, Tito Ortiz, but, you know, certainly post 2009, Brock Lesnar, and then obviously later Conor and Ronda era, where they were like heavily trying to invest in stars, you just knew that the MMA business was a star-powered and star-driven business. The biggest money was on pay-per-view. They wanted to make the pay-per-views as big as possible. And it was also an exciting time, too, because there were other MMA promotions, some that wouldn't last. The UFC was acquiring Strikeforce. They were acquiring WEC. They were adding this roster. There was all this like massive influx of quality all of a sudden, to say nothing of the collapse of Pride circa 2007. That era is clearly over, not just because those fighters are mostly gone, although the GFL is trying to keep them in business. You know what I mean? It's kind of funny. But
Tony Ferguson versus Dylan Dennis.
Yeah. But the thing I'm trying to point out is like that kind of instinct of the UFC to try and maximally build as many big names as possible to cash in on pay-per-view as much as possible. They've gone to a much more contracted revenue model. That's just not really the case. It doesn't exist anymore. And I do think that is harming the product. But one lesson I've kind of had to learn on the other side, that not to say that fans who feel this way are wrong, far from it. It's actually something that I've had to learn, which is there are certain fans who started watching at a time when the UFC was already well established into doing 40 plus events a year. And for them, there is, at least, like, we have to acknowledge there is a certain kind of fan, and I think it's probably a little more common than we might imagine, who is like, not to say that they don't care who's competing that week, that would not be correct. They still definitely prioritize big names and big fights. But at the same time, they just kind of interface with the product where, hey, if it's on Saturday, I'll watch it. I might sometimes put it on in the background, but I'm just happy that there are events all the time, and some might be good, some might be bad, but I like that consistency over time rather than the world we grew up in, which was, yes, there was expanding UFC events, and they've had, nearly 40 or 40 plus for quite some time, but there was still nevertheless this like a very strong emphasis on star building. And I have kind of had to learn that like there are different ways to interface with the product, and we just have to accept it. I might add one more thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the fighter pay debate about like, oh, these guys are underpaid, because the fighters don't seem to care. So honestly, why should I? I'm being serious. Like if anything, they either don't care or they get mad at you for it. Like
Kamaru Usman was building the case. I think it was with Terrence Crawford that UFC fighters actually get paid really well.
Yeah, I mean he's not saying very. I think he believes that, but
yeah,
it's simply not true. I mean, it's just like quite obviously not true. But the point I want to make is one thing that is also missing that I do think we should kind of realize, and it affects both ends of the spectrum, which is that you have these guys like Cedric Doumbé, Saladin Parnasse, and more recently Artem Vakitov, who went through the Contender Series. I want to say something very clearly. Artem Vakitov in kickboxing is better than Izzy and Poatan. That's not in any way an exaggeration. That is quite real. He's better than both of them. And he goes to the Contender Series, and he's like, yeah, I guess in the end, I don't want to take that. I get more money doing kickboxing. I'll just keep doing that. It used to be the reverse, that kickboxers were looking for a big payday by matriculating over to MMA. And then on the more prospect side, like, these guys like Saladin Parnasse, they're just not signing them because like KSW pays them a bunch of money. And they're like, we don't want to pay that. Dude, I remember when they were paying Hector Lombard big money to come over from Bellator. And then on the other end, you've got John Jones being like, oh, I want 30 million to fight. They should call his bluff. They can easily afford it. They can pay for this kind of stuff, but they're not, because they're holding to a business model that limits what overall athlete compensation is during any kind of calendar year. And I think that has kind of damaged the product to a degree where you're not recruiting the same kind of stars. Stars are kind of sitting out for certain longer periods. Connor did it. Cejudo did it. John's been doing it for quite some time. And then, Francis left. It's kind of an issue. So to me, all of these factors kind of have recently culminated in a broader fan awareness. But I think a lot of these things have been in play for quite some time.
Can you imagine being in the room when Hunter Campbell tells Vakitov's team, listen, this is the best we can do. 12-12. Take this deal. And these guys seem like they were pretty I don't think these guys were looking for a crazy deal. Like if you approached them and you said, hey, let's 50-50, 60-60, this guy's still unproven, I'm pretty sure they would have at least kind of considered it. It looked like they were considering anything. But 12-12 was just something the UFC wouldn't budge off.
Yeah, I mean, and the funny part about it is, to your point, like Cedric Doumbé was saying on his YouTube channel, whenever this was, I think 2021, 2022, somewhere along that. And look, not all these guys are going to pan out. Like maybe they signed Vakitov and they're like, oh yeah, he's not very good at MMA. Fuck it, let's just cut ties with him. That's very possible, right? But you only really need one guy to break through. Like maybe Parnasse breaks through, and all of a sudden, boom, you got a star. But the thing is, I always go back to this. Remember, in 2023, they made $1.3+ billion, more than every other MMA and boxing promoter combined. It's like, we're not talking. I mean, obviously you have an Australian audience, so I don't know exactly what the proper comparison would be, but take for example here, Major League Baseball, right? Most Australians would probably be somewhat aware that the New York Yankees are a big team, right? This is a big team. They sign a lot of big players. They just signed I think they signed Juan Soto, right? They signed either them or the Mets. I forget who signed them. I mean, one of the two teams, but whatever. They get big names. A lot of the most famous players, play over there. That's very different than the, Oakland Athletics, which is a very small, it's Major League Baseball, but it's not a very big market team. They don't have a lot of money. They're not going to sign, for example, like Shohei Ohtani, like the Japanese guy. Who does he play for? The LA Dodgers, right? He doesn't play for a small market team. The point I'm trying to make is, yeah, the Oakland Athletics can't sign Shohei Ohtani. That's not realistic, but the LA Dodgers can. That's my point with the UFC. It's like, dude, they're not a small market team. They can afford all of this. And I'm not saying they have to pay every guy what they're asking every time, but I guess just speaking personally, I would like to see a little bit more competitiveness to go and sign interesting prospects. And to the point, maybe some of them bottom out, maybe some of them are no good, but if one breaks through, you're cooking with gas.
Someone read Moneyball in the UFC office and were just like, hey, we have all this money, but we still just want to get on base. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was just going to quickly say, man, UFC 314, you were about to give me the rating out of 10 as we do per show as we preview the fights. But do you think this is enough to bring the interest back that we had before this whole Alex Pereira and Ankalaev fight happened? Or is this just the new reality that we probably be likely dealing with, that you think this interest level?
This card is very, very good. I would give this an easy 9, maybe more than that out of 10. I mean, it's an excellent, excellent card. You have the former #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport coming back, trying to reclaim his title against, I would say, a very deserving contender. You know, Chandler versus Pimblett is actually very good matchmaking. That could be a very fun fight with good or interesting consequences, I should say. You know, your mileage may vary on the Bryce Mitchell or Silva fight, but just as a fight, that is certainly a good fight. And then, of course, Rodriguez and Pitbull, and then Krylov and Reyes on that main card. I mean, here's the thing. Like, there's no denying as fights, it's all quality. Like, there's absolutely nothing. But, dude, I remember even at his peak, Volkanovski was not like the big name in the industry. He was very, very, very well respected with the good reason. As I mentioned, this was a guy who, after UFC 276, when he beat Max the third time, I was like, dude, that's the best fighter in the sport. Like, holy shit, like that guy's incredible. But he was not like the biggest draw. He was not like the biggest name. There was a tier of guys above him. And there still is. John, I think, is there. You know, Islam is certainly going to be in that category. But it doesn't feel like there's very many of them. So the thing that I might dock from this card is not that they don't have relevant quality fights up and down. For sure that they do. But do they have a major star on the card? No, they do not.
I think it's one of those things where, depending what happens on the night, is depending where the interest goes, right? Because, like, if you have Lopes winning, obviously he's a great fighter. Everybody would be excited about him being champion in terms of the more hardcore fan base and obviously people in his home country and the demographics that he's in. But if Alex Volkanovski can do it and he's back in there, well, Volkanovski's more over than he's ever been. He's like on every single commercial here in Australia at the moment. He's got a new deal with The Rock. And now you build towards this potential fight with him and Mosa. Then afterwards, maybe this Ilia Topuria rematch. You got him back in the game. And then what if Paddy Pimblett goes out there, somehow starches Michael Chandler and walks out of there and says, hey, I'm the new big name here at lightweight. Now you've got a Paddy Pimblett situation where you can push that guy. Obviously, the Pitbull Yair thing's very interesting. What if Pitbull's able to go out there and make a big statement there? So and even Gian Silva, man, if he goes out there and flatlines Bryce Mitchell after he called basically all of us heathen perverts, maybe that's going to change things as well. And we'll talk about that in a second. But let me ask you, what do you make of this version of this? The photos, the videos, the footage that we're seeing of Alex Volkanovski training right now. He looks in absolutely incredible shape. He's at Freestyle MMA with JDM ahead of his fight with Bilal. He's not really taking much media. He's just focused on the gym. Him and his team have been absolutely locked on for a long time now. He's been waiting for this return on bated breath for so long. He's not really loved having to sit on the sidelines, but we can't have any excuses about him not being 100%, about him not being fully recovered. I want to know from you, what kind of version of Alex Volkanovski do you think we see in this shape with this break? Do you believe that age is a factor, or do you believe he can regain the Alex Volkanovski of old as he steps into this Miami card?
I think in terms of technical proficiency and skill, and more than just that, good game plan, the ability to go should he need to, 5-minute rounds. I don't really have even the slightest degree of question about that. Like, he has proven what he can do. Now, I understand he's coming off the consecutive stoppage losses, but I mean, at his peak, like, look at what he was able to show. Just the highest level of professionalism in the game. I mean, that's really what he's shown. He's the highest level of professionalism that basically you can expect out of a UFC prize fighter. Now, he miscalculated quite badly, I think, taking that Islam fight on short notice. And then obviously, I think Topuria is a generational talent. So it's a little bit different for that. And he's aging. But, you know, this is one of those things where, like, to me, this fight, like, you know, who's a better fighter, Volkanovski or Lopes? Dude, Volkanovski is obviously a better fighter. Like, to me, this is not even really a debate. Who has shown greater upside? Volkanovski has shown greater upside. Who's, you know what I mean? Like, Volkanovski has a argument, and it's debatable, obviously, but he's got an argument as like the most talented featherweight we've ever seen. mean, just think about that for a second. Like, he's got an argument for that. Again, it's debatable, but if you're going to have an argument about that, how do you have one without him front and center in it? This is what I'm talking about. But that is one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is, as we indicated, he did lose that Islam fight the first time, and then he got stopped in the second one under, he should never have taken that fight. And I just want to say, like, fighters have to be confident, but it is such a thin line between the kind of confidence that propels you to greatness and the kind of overconfidence that ends up being a dearly costly mistake. And he paid for that. And, you should never, ever, ever, ever fight the number one pound for pound guy in the world on short notice. Like, how badly that can backfire, I think you all saw. And I know Dan Hooker recently said, like, Ilia didn't do anything that great. It wasn't like he did anything super special. I really disagree with that analysis. I understand he's backing this guy. I totally get it. But I think Ilia Topuria is special, and it doesn't even matter. It's that he got flatlined again. And now, how old is Volk? 36? Where is he?
Yeah, I think he's turning 37. Let's have a look.
I would love to know that.
He's 36, and he's turning 37 on the 29th of September.
Yeah, so we still got a little time. So let's just say 36. He's on the wrong side, the wrong side of 35 at this point, coming off of terrible back-to-back stoppage losses. I know that people probably in your neck of the woods want to believe that if anybody can overcome it, it's him. Okay, fair enough. That's true. I wouldn't argue with that at all. But he's also human, and those losses are bad. And they are bad because, I don't think the psychological impact is what I'm worried about. That part to me, like, sometimes, you can get a bad knockout loss and it changes a guy. They're less risk. They're more risk averse, right? I'm not betting on that. But it can, as you age and the more miles you get, it automatically diminishes your chin to a degree. And then when you get stopped back to back like that, it can have irreparable consequences for your durability. And that is just something that's going to be hard to control against a guy in Lopes who is not as technically skilled, is not the kind of guy who's, even if Lopes wins this title, do I think he's going to go on a similar kind of run where he can become a pound for pound number one guy in the sport? I don't think that. So, like, again, like, the quality of who Volk is simply unquestionable. However, that costly mistake in taking that Islam fight and then, running into Topuria right afterward is just bad timing. I have real questions about his durability heading into this. And Lopes is a guy who, for all of his technical inefficiencies, is a guy who finds offense everywhere and can blitz in an instant. And that is exactly the kind of dangerous matchup that could cost Volk again.
It's fascinating because, me and Casper used to talk to Alex Volkanovski quite a lot before anybody knew who he was, even when he was in the UFC. And for people that don't realize, this is a guy that really struggled. He had to live, I believe, in his parents' or his wife's parents' house in the basement. They didn't have enough money to get things together. The UFC wouldn't sign him for a really, really long period of time. And even when they did, no one really paid attention to him. Even when he became champion, people didn't really give him the kudos that he deserved. And then he got an opportunity to make money by taking these short notice fights. And apparently financially, him and his manager, Ash, were able to secure the bag. But it came at the cost of him taking these fights very, very frequently. And like you mentioned, of him taking that damage. So I understand where he's coming from. I had a personal conversation with him in Sydney. Well, we spoke about the fact that he's more popular than ever in Australia. And he said he can't believe that people are giving me all these deals, blah, 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 blah. Back in the day when I was winning, basically people didn't really even care. Now everybody loves him. So part of it is this is going to be the big point, I think. Where is this going to go? All the decisions and all the sacrifices, the business stuff behind the scenes that you and me don't really know what was going on. He's got another kid on the way. There is a lot of stuff happening for Volkanovski.
How many kids does he have?
Dude, I think this is his fourth kid that got announced.
Damn.
So the guy is crushing it. He bought a great farm. Like, you couldn't be happier for the guy. But of course, that comes at the price that you mentioned. And that is him taking that damage as he gets older. Let me ask you this. Diego Lopes spoke to our friend Denny Segura, and he said, when it comes to people sort of talking about this fight, Lopes said, people are still hanging on to what happened in the fight against Dan Ige, that I slowed down. But that's okay. People have mouths, and they'll say whatever they want. I'm ready for Volkanovski's best version. I'm ready to show my best version. And that's coming off the fact of, I know as a personal fact, This is a guy that's also just hunkered down in the gym, has refused most interviews, and ever since this Alex Volkanovski fight has been announced, has been obsessed with getting better. My question for you is, what does the best version of Diego Lopes look like, and do you think that's enough to get the belt here in Miami?
The best version is enough, but like the way I would answer it is, if we were talking peak Volk and peak Lopes, this fight would not be very difficult for me to prognosticate. I'd be like, oh yeah, Volk. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't even really, Volk dismantled Yair, and Yair is a different fighter than Lopes, but there are some similarities about the kinds of dangers that they pose, and Volk handled that one real well. You know what I mean? So I think it would not surprise. I mean, here's the thing, right? One version of this fight we could look at is the Max fight, the third one, where he just kind of stunts on him and then controls him for the duration of the contest. Max is a very different fighter than Diego, than Diego, but could find ways to make it look in a similar kind of way. Another version is it looks like that for long periods of time, and then there's just one tiny error, and then Diego seals the whole thing. Like, consider, Volk has been dropped any number of times. Obviously, he got dropped by Islam and Ilia in the last two fights, but he got dropped by Chad Mendes. He got dropped by Brian Ortega. He's been dropped by Max. He's been dropped by a lot of guys. And he's been able to rally and recover. But, how many times can you pull a rabbit out of a hat? I think that, you might get a certain degree of comfort if you're an Australian fan watching it and being like, dude, he's cruising here. This is great. Obviously, blah, blah. And that's a real possibility. But the question is, can he do that for long periods of time without making a mistake? We shall see. The other thing is, obviously Diego is going to have a series of strengths that are very different than Volk's. So for example, he's got an active guard. He'll blitz with a barrage of punches in short order. And so Volk has got to be real careful about clinching, exiting the clinch, spatial awareness in the cage, all those kinds of things. So to me, I know I'm repeating myself here, but it really comes down to, it's Lopes is dangerous. He has, I think, again, the sort of machine gun fire kind of combinations. He'll take risks, doesn't mind being taken down, has offense in literally all positions. It's somewhat unrefined in certain cases, but it's there, it's aggressive, and it's present, and it's quick. So for Volk, it's really about pulling the pin keeping the pin in the grenade, rather. It's about doing that and kind of finding a way to contain him or stay out of the way of danger. And so you have to ask yourself, if you're Volk, against Max, you could kind of, so I talked to Max's striking coach after that bout, and one thing they mentioned to me was, were the feints difficult for Max to read? Sometimes that was an issue, but that really wasn't the issue. The issue was Volk was so good about going first, letting him go second, and then going third, first and third. It was just a constant thing that Max was getting wrapped up into, but he could kind of manage the fight that way. But it seemed to me that Max is a little bit more willing to duel, and in that third fight in particular was more willing to duel with him on those terms. It seems like Diego is much more willing to take risks, throw caution to the wind. So if you're Volk, do you want to have a touch and go game plan, or do you want to have the best way to fight fire is with fire, get in his face a little bit and contain it that way? And I don't really know what the answer is, but it's an interesting dilemma that he faces.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. I was talking to Volk's coach when this fight got announced, Joe Lopes. He actually spoke about Diego Lopes as a little bit of a Brian Ortega. He said to me that they feel like he's got a lot of similar qualities when it comes to the groundwork, and he even feels like Lopes might be more dangerous. Now, we know Craig Jones is working directly with Alex Volkanovski right now, Freestyle MMA, Wing Dang. We know he's got a great team there, so they're taking that seriously. What do you think the ground battle between what Volk can do and what Lopes can do? You mentioned he's got an active guard. What do you think it could end up looking like in this fight? And who do you think has the advantage here?
Well, pure jiu-jitsu versus pure jiu-jitsu, Diego Lopes. But, that's probably not what it would be. Max. Volk has faced very good grapplers, right? He faced Islam, who's a very good grappler, a different kind, but a good grappler. And obviously Brian Ortega is a lights out grappler who's got an unbelievable clamp. Where a clamp I define as like some guys in jiu-jitsu, like consider Sean Brady. Sean Brady in that Leon Edwards takes his time, and Leon Edwards bout, excuse me. He kind of takes his time to set it up. He goes reverse Kesagatami or reverse half guard, and he threatens with the Kimura, and if that doesn't work, he reaches behind, right? And he goes for the guillotine. So he plays this game of pick your poison, but it takes a little time. It didn't get it till the 4th round. Ortega's the kind of guy who sees something and just clamps on it immediately. He can find the submission very, very quickly, right? So he's got a clamp like that. Diego's got a clamp like that too. Maybe not as good as Brian Ortega's in that particular regard, but it's good. Like, it's very good. So this is what I mean. If he rocks you with a punch and you stumble, he's going to snatch something up. So I think that's the issue for him that he has to worry about. Could he do something, Volk, like if he got a takedown and then worked inside of Diego's guard or half guard, something like that? Could that be a viable path? We talked about, like, what do? Do you do touch and go, or do you like go into the mouth of the lion a little bit? Well, one way to do that would be to take him down, and then I'm not saying borrow exactly what Movsar did, but borrow elements from that and then soften him up with ground and pound. And then what you'll notice is, one of the thing that makes Lopes dangerous with his risk taking is just that. He'll surprise you. He'll throw something you're not expecting. He'll close range when you're not expecting. Like, they'll do something quick and explosive that you're not expecting. But the other part about that is when they get tired, they become so much more predictable. They might still take risks, but it's such a much more labored endeavor. And I don't think he has bad cardio. And I bet you if you ask Alexander Volkanovski, like, oh, are you expecting him to fade? They're not planning on Diego Lopes ever fading. Right? They're planning on him being there for 25 minutes in his face. But the point I'm trying to make is take Lopes down. You saw, dude, an underrated part of Volk's game, good ground and pound. Good ground and pound. Now, it doesn't last for long periods of time, but these punctuated moments are actually pretty good about it. And I do think he's got good takedowns when he wants to. So that's an option, right? Soften this guy up. And then after you're done softening him up, well, then you can exchange with him much more easily on the feet because he becomes so much more predictable. He kind of he'll retreat to like the baseline of his level of skill. You don't have to worry about the explosive surprises that he's sometimes capable of. So these are the things, I think, the fault lines around which this fight will be contested.
Dude, this fight could go so many different ways. Like, Diego Lopes could just lunge at Volk at some point, like you mentioned, and finish this. Volk could control this and put on a clinic like he did against Max. It's honestly so hard to predict it. But let's say it's a scenario where, Volk goes out there, makes a mistake. Maybe he's still not the same Volk that he was before those stoppages. Lopes is able to stop him early. Do you think there's a chance we see Alex Volkanovski now that he's coming on to 37, and if this fight doesn't go the way that he hopes it's going to go, do you think there's a chance he might retire in Miami if things kind of fall off a cliff for him here?
I think he'll probably want to have a retirement fight in Australia, right? I think that. I can't read his mind, but I doubt he wants to go out like that. And that doesn't mean it's a good idea to keep going. Could be a good idea, could be a bad idea, but I just get the feeling that, like, is he really thinking about today? Is he thinking about his career ending in Miami? I don't really believe that, And also, like, the other part too is if you lose to Lopes badly, okay, that kind of portends the end. But if it's close, I don't know. That's a little bit different, right? Because then let's see what happens between Yair and Patrício Pitbull. Yeah, there's ways where, you're not necessarily that far out of it, at least a big fight or a potential number one contender fight. But I think if he goes in there and gets finished and waxed, that's a different problem.
Yeah, I think if it's close, he sticks around. It's kind of funny because in boxing, like, someone in his position might get a warm-up fight to get back into it.
Oh, yeah.
There's no warm-up fight here, but if it's close, it's almost like a warm-up fight in the sense they're like, all right, like, you were close with Lopes. You showed that you're kind of back. You've been out of the octagon for a while, so we understand maybe you weren't there, but this is a good lead into you coming back,
Dude, isn't Tim Tszyu fighting Joey Spencer in Australia?
That's right. That's right. So, like,
he fought, who was it? Mirzakhanov. I forget the guy's name. Murtazaliev, I think, is his name. I forget the guy. He was widely expected to win this bout. and it went badly. And this is definitely a tune-up fight for him. So let's see what happens.
Let me ask you this, man. Ilia Topuria, did he make a mistake here by not just keeping the title and fighting in Miami? Because look at the situation that we're in. A lot of people are sort of building out this case. Paddy Pimblett goes out there and wins. All of a sudden, the UFC gets behind him. 155 could not be more gridlocked right now with so many difficult fights. Would it have just benefited him to go out there, have this another huge rematch with Alex Volkanovski, keep building his star power, and headline this Miami card? And even for the UFC, a massive fight there too.
The only way to answer that is to see what lightweight fight he gets. There's no other way to answer that, because someone proposed this scenario to me today, which was, let's say Jack Della Maddalena, another Aussie, goes in there and beats Bilal Muhammad. Again, I don't know if he will, but let's just posit that scenario. Well, then it kind of opens up the door to Islam going up to 170. And if Islam goes to 170, they could do an interim title for, this is the scenario that was posited to me, Justin Gaethje for an interim title, or even the full lightweight title if they make Islam drop it, against Ilia. Well, okay, if you're Ilia, did you need to fight Volk again if you're just going to get a 55 title fight against Gaethje, which I think I would favor Ilia to win that one? You know what I mean? So that's, if that happens, well, then no, it was not much of a mistake, I suppose. And also the other part too is, like, I don't get the vibe that Ilia, he says this, and just the way he's acting, it's true. I don't get the vibe he's going to do this for very long, man. You know what I mean? Like, he's
what do you mean?
Here,
you think he's not going to hang around for long, or?
I'd be surprised if he's still fighting at 36. I'll put it that way.
Why? What is it about? What do you think? Is it just for the fact that he doesn't need the money? He's got, like, this is more of a...
Yeah, I mean, everything he's following the Conor McGregor path, just not with the crime and the awful behavior, like he's trying to, the point I'm trying to make is he's trying to escalate all the time. Like, there's no staying put. Everything is an escalation. And if you succeed on that path, you don't have much left to go pretty quickly. I don't know if he will. Again, this is why the matchmaking and, like, what he gets ultimately determines how we understand this. But he's here for a good time, not a long time. And it seems that way anyway. Now, again, his plans might get derailed and then things change. But if he does get a title fight next and he does win it, I think he will stick around lightweight for a little while longer. But, like, for 5 more years or something, that seems very unlikely to me, unless he loses and he changes his view and his plans or something. But there's definitely a version, and I think it's the one that he wants. That's get in there, bang bang, win a bunch of fights, collect a few belts, make a big name for yourself, and then go do something else.
Dude, that's fascinating, man. And hey, by the way, before we move on from this, JDM, Jack Daly, he's actually hosting a dinner April 14th, the Ruvo Bar and Grill in Perth, Australia. So if you're local, please go to it. He's actually running a fundraiser, Luke, because they don't have enough money, or they need to raise some money for his full team to get over to his title fight. So this is just a stark reality. We were talking about fighters not getting paid any money. The UFC doesn't really pay for your entire team to go over and actually corner you. So These guys have obviously only just been in the UFC for a certain amount of time. They're trying to run a fundraiser so they have enough money to corner their boy. Make sure to support him if you're in Perth, the Ruvo Bar and Grill. Let's try and get his whole team over there. So he has his best chance in the main event. Anyway, who would have thought you would have had to say something like that for a guy fighting for the belt? But that is the stark reality of MMA. Just quickly, before we move off this fight, man, we just broke it down a little bit. We got a feel for it. What do you think? What is your prediction? What do you think we see in Miami? Who do you think wins?
In the main event?
Yeah.
Do you have the betting odds? I'd be curious to see what the betting odds are.
Let me bring those betting odds up for us. Let's see. So
I hate, I'm not very good at predictions. I'm good at post-mortem, and I'm good at kind of, halfway decent anyway, at kind of understanding where the fight will be won and lost. But I hate doing predictions for this reason.
I've got here the Vegas odds. Alex Volkanovski -150, Diego Lopes +130. I'm going to go out and I'm going to give my prediction. I feel like we're going to see Alex Volkanovski go out there, control Diego Lopes, and regain the belt. I actually have this feeling that he's going to be able to regain some of the stuff that he lost after those 2 losses because of the break and the fact that these guys have been focused so long on this return. But what do you think, Luke?
I have a feeling, I hate to say this, I have a feeling he's going to get clipped. And that's going to be real bad for him. Dude, I mean, it's just a rule of life. Once a fighter is separated from the UFC title, it's so hard to get it back. And, you know, you can see versions of that. You know, Couture did it. Shevchenko did it recently. Even Izzy did it, but then lost it right after. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't last very long, even if you can get it back. It's so freaking hard. And the fact that he's on the wrong side of 35 and he's coming off of back-to-back terrible stoppage losses. Like, please don't misunderstand me. I don't think anything would be, it'd be awesome if he won. And if the odds are close, it's a close fight for that reason. But I think it's close, not because people think that Diego Lopes is, you know, commensurate in skill with him. I think that it's a question of all the things we've outlined previously. So, you know, at a bare minimum, I'll say this. Even if you think Volk might win, Diego as a betting underdog is probably a good bet, a literal bet. You know what I mean?
Let's talk about Michael Chandler and Paddy Pimblett, man. This is going to be fascinating here as well. So many ways this can break down too. But I got to ask you, first things first, what do you make of Paddy Pimblett's striking? How much improvement do you think he's made since we saw him have that UFC debut against Luigi Vendrami, as I destroy that surname? I'm the worst at this. And obviously he's got some gaps. He keeps his chin in the air. He's very wide open. That front leg is there to be kicked. How much improvement do you think Paddy Pimblett's made from then to that win over Bobby Green that we saw, or King Green, just recently?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's definitely cleaned up a lot. When he first came to the UFC, I was like, I mean, how are you, you know, 20 fights into your career and you're this green, frankly? He's definitely gotten a lot less green, and not just in the striking, but all over, mixing the game. Also, like, he's physically kind of, you know, put on some good size as well.
Yeah, he looks big, doesn't he?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, that destruction of Bobby Green was impressive, to be perfectly clear. I still have issues with his cardio. I don't know if his cardio is all that great. You know, in the Ferguson fight wasn't super impressive for that reason. Obviously, the Green fight was like half a round, so it didn't really matter. The striking is interesting to me. I think he's cleaned it up, but I still think his bread and butter is clearly the grappling, clearly the takedowns. He's got very good back control. That's always been his strong suit, but it's gotten even better. But on the defensive end, especially if he gets tired, dude, if he gets tired and that fight goes into the third, dude, you know, I don't know what Chandler's going to do. Chandler's going to be 39 this month. Later this month, he's going to be 39. But somebody's going to send that chin into orbit. I mean, he's going to get popped for it eventually. If again, assuming he keeps fighting that way, and if his cardio is not on point, because it becomes quite labored. And to your point, like, you know, it's just by the way, it's like, the thing that drives me nuts about that is not that it's not, you know, a lot of people bring their chin up when they jab or when they throw, but it's something that again, it's kind of a function of being green. Like, you know, a boxing coach should really be like trying to iron that out, where the chin stays tucked and the shoulder comes to protect it, you know, whatever. And his is like, you know, it's a natural reaction for the chin to come up when you throw like that. So the bigger question, or the better one, or I should say the way I'm thinking about this, he's absolutely got the skills to beat Michael Chandler. He absolutely has the skills to beat him, but you can't be too sure, because he's never beaten somebody this good, even at a 38 or 39-year-old Michael Chandler. He's certainly never beaten an athlete this good, you know, and he's never beaten anybody this experienced. When you say, well, Tony Ferguson, okay, but Tony was like mega washed by the time that they fought, right? So it was like completely you know, Chandler looked decent enough in his last fight, where he doesn't look, you know, peak, but he doesn't look washed by any stretch. So this is a super interesting fight. The long story short is, his striking is much improved, but definitely still a liability to a degree.
If I'm Chandler here, I'm trying to get in the pocket. I'm trying to capitalize on those openings, right? But then also against King Green was able to land a bunch of teeps. He was able to land shots on that lead leg, and Paddy Pimblett's stance is so wide, right? But it kind of doesn't have that danger of a Gunnar Nelson or a Conor McGregor, where he's got a shot behind it that's going to put you out. Although if Chandler is rushing in, surely, hopefully in Pimblett's mind, he's able to capitalize and catch him on the way in. I'm curious, though, when it comes to the grappling, we saw Charles Oliveira spend time on Chandler's back. He wasn't able to catch him there. How do you think the ground game goes between Chandler and Pimblett?
You know, he's definitely dealt with very skilled back operators before. But the other part about Dustin is like Dustin will like lump you up before he ever gets there. Pimblett's not exactly that guy, but and I don't think Pimblett's as good on the back as Charles, but I definitely think he's a threat to finish from that particular place. So the question for me is, if he does get to the back, how soon is it? And what else is happening in the fight? Because if he's tired, if he's been beaten up, I don't really have any concerns. Whereas Charles could be tired, Charles could be beaten up, and you're like, yeah, you better not let your guard down at all. Same thing with Dustin Poirier. You know what I mean? Dustin Poirier could get beat up a little bit and could be kind of tired, but it's still going to be a pretty significant threat. So for me, it's like, if you're Michael Chandler, I don't think you should necessarily have any fear about going to the ground, but I'm going to treat it like the opposite of the Volk fight, where the Volk fight, I think like maybe an early takedown and like, kind of working on this guy, if depending on how they want to play it, that could be a thing that they could do. Conversely, if I'm Chandler, I'm trying to thump this guy a little early, and then maybe later, if it goes to the ground, you can then have your way with him there, rather than like letting a fresh guy like that begin to work his game and advance position.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. Like, you got a guy with Charles Oliveira on his back just jumping up and down in his last fight, right? But that's a Michael Chandler fight for you. Like, strategically, he could probably go out there and beat a lot of these guys, but he's not really thinking. And with like Dustin Poirier, for example, you could see that potentially he thought, well, what's Poirier going to do to my back? I'm a guy that's pretty skilled in this area. And then it kind of slipped away from him, and Poirier kind of beat him into that submission. Let me ask you this, though. If you're Paddy Pimblett, you walk out here and you win in Miami, the UFC is trying to get behind a number of stars, but you have 155 that's packed. You got guys like Topuria, back to what we were talking about, Armin, Charles, Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway. With a win here, where do you think Paddy Pimblett slots in next? Like, do you just push him to the top, or do you give him this Topuria fight because the guys already hate each other? And
Topuria, I mean, I give Paddy a lot of credit. He's gotten a lot better than I thought he would. Topuria would break his jaw. Like, what are we talking about here? You know what I mean? Topuria is a black belt in jiu-jitsu who has very good wrestling, has already beaten, dude, he fucking knocked out Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway back-to-back. Even if you want to put caveats on. Oh, and by the way, made Bryce Mitchell reconsider ever fighting again, at least temporarily. Like, dude, he would do evil things to Paddy Pimblett. Like, I'm not saying I don't want to see that fight, but that's a borderline mismatch, so I don't have much interest in seeing that at all, at least not right away. But I'll say this, in fairness to Paddy, let's be fair to him. You beat Michael Chandler, you deserve a big prize. That's a big scalp, man. That's a good one. Top 5 guy, or I'm not even sure where Chandler is, maybe even top 3. You could get a fight with Poirier. I don't know if he would want to do that, but like, you'd be entitled to something like that. You could do, I'm just going to throw it out there. This is not my choice, but you could do a Max Holloway fight. I think a Charles Oliveira fight would actually be kind of sick. Again, in the world where you're talking about where Paddy beats Chandler.
Yep.
Kind of Paddy versus Oliveira is nasty. That's a good fight. But I'll say this, somebody big where if he beats that person, he would get a title shot. Yeah. Like, do you give him Armin? Could you do Armin versus Paddy if he beats Chandler? It's another one you could do, somewhere in that orbit, something like that, I think would be the appropriate response.
What about a Dan Hooker fight? That could be interesting.
Does Dan Hooker want that? Is that who he wants?
So. I think he wants Armin.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I think he wants a big name right at the top. I mean, he would listen, if Paddy goes out there and looks awesome, hey man, he might have some suitors lining up to be like, I want a piece of that, but
yeah.
But I think Hooker's probably got other ideas. The point you raise is like, would Hooker versus Paddy be good? Yeah, it would be good. I just don't know if these guys want that kind of a thing,
Also Justin Gaethje floating around, but I don't think he would take a fight with Paddy. I think he wants
a title. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's very interesting. But then I think Islam's also waiting to see what happens between Bilal and JD. Anyway,
100%.
That whole division, man, you could move it around 100 different ways, and tomorrow it's completely different. I just think it's funny how Ilia Topuria vacated his belt, right, to move up to this division where it's like could the timing be any worse for this? Honestly.
Dude, we talked about this the
Do they
last
need
time
him
I
any
was on.
less
I
in that
hate
division?
this. I hate this. I would have loved for him to have stayed at 45, fight Volk again. If he beats him, great. Okay, and then we can talk about something a little bit different. But to the point you raised, oh, I beat Max and I'm done. What? Like, there's a whole line of these dudes that the amazing fights to make. So, listen, on the one hand, it's not great timing. If you're the UFC, you do have a bunch of different cards that you can play, different hands you can play. So I just hope that they can make the best ones that are available.
All right. Well, it's going to be interesting how that works out. And what about this one? Bryce Mitchell coming in to fight Gian Silva. He was on MMA Guru's podcast, spoke about his thoughts on lukewarm Christians going out with a witch, Gian Silva being the devil, and all sorts of other interesting things around communism. I got to ask you this, Luke.
Interesting.
I got to ask you this, Luke. Anthony Smith sort of brought it up to him when he interviewed him yesterday about him kind of being a lamb led to slaughter. Do you feel like there's an element of him sort of being put on this card in that notion? Or is Bryce Mitchell just matched up with another good guy in Gian Silva, and this is just a side narrative that's going in here?
I mean, I can understand why he brought it on himself, but I can understand why he might have a persecution complex. You know what I mean? Personally, I would not go fishing with pre-meth Hitler. That's a personal thing, but I want to be clear. I'm not like in any way saying, oh, I think what he said is funny or interesting. I don't think it's any of those things, but he said them, and then listen, Dana White didn't cut him from the organization, but Dana White came out publicly and called him stupid. You know what I mean? Like. Mm-hmm. That can't feel good. And I'm sure he got attacked on social media. I'm sure people blew him up for this. I'm sure he had, can you imagine like the conversations he had with UFC staff and blah, blah, blah. I'm sure he's got some kind of a persecution complex. I'm going to say it one more time. I think he brought it on himself, but you know how this goes. Fighters will take anything that happens around them and they'll use it for fuel. You know what I mean? Like they'll take, oh, this little slight happened and now I want to kick this guy's ass. Can you imagine like the MMA world? I mean, obviously the Third Reich came to his defense in my Twitter mentions, but but there were a lot of people that came after him. So yeah, he's probably using that as some kind of competitive fuel, and I don't know what effect it will have. He's got a very good fighter in front of him, but I don't necessarily think that the UFC is like setting him up lamb to the slaughter, in the sense that like if this fight stays on the feet, yeah, he's gonna get hurt real bad. I think that's probably quite likely. However, like what do we really know about the depths of Silva's takedown defense and ground game? Where, in fairness to Bryce Mitchell, he is quite good, very good there, as a matter of fact. Right? Remember, this is the guy who got a twister submission, for crying out loud. So. To me, that is actually like kind of an interesting battle here. So is Gian Silva and his striking extremely innovative and unique and obviously extremely dangerous? There can be no question. But there's a little bit unknown about him too. Bryce could be the guy that shows us exactly what that looks like. So I think he's just got a bit of a persecution complex. I don't think the UFC is like, I've seen UFC set up fights where guys were expected to lose, you know what I mean? And this doesn't look like that to me.
All right, guys, I just want to take a quick moment to talk about our sponsors, Manscaped and SAILY, and a big thank you to them for making it possible for me to bring this show to you. The Beard and Balls bundle from Manscaped is the place to go. It's your all-in-one grooming solution to keep you polished from head to toe, more precisely from beard to balls. It's got all-in-one grooming. The Beard Hedger is your go-to for precise beard trimming, and the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra takes care of everything below the waist, because confidence starts with the right tools. You got customizable trimming, a dual blade system on the Lawnmower 5.0, which features interchangeable foil and trimmer blades, ensuring a smooth and comfortable experience, even in the sensitive areas. And what about this? The long-lasting power. Enjoy up to 60 minutes of runtime with a Beard Hedger and 75 minutes with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. And by the way, it is risk-free. That's right, guys. Manscaped is now risk-free. Get it on Manscaped's 30-day money-back guarantee. You can try the Beard and Balls bundle today, completely risk-free, with Manscaped's 30-day money-back guarantee. And that's not all. If you want to support this program, use the code word submission. You get 20% off and free shipping right now. That's 20% off and free shipping right now across the whole Manscaped website. I just want to thank Manscaped again for making it possible for me to bring this interview to you. Go to manscaped.com right now, get the beer and bowls bundle, and get 20% off and free shipping right now with the code word submission. And for anybody looking to travel out there is no better eSIM than SAILY. SAILY has you sorted with its 115 virtual locations, super fast speeds, security features, and what about the fact that you guys get an ad blocker in the app as well, so you don't have to watch annoying ads and use up your data when you watch stuff all over your phone. What about the fact that you don't need to switch out your eSIMs because you can just use the one SAILY profile for everywhere you go? No more lining up at airports, no more having to take out SIM cards from your phone, putting new SIM cards in. SAILY gives you all of the options to get as much data for as long as you need. You got weekly plans, you got plans that last half a year. And SAILY always lets you know when you're about to run out of data. It gives you a little notification when you used up 80% of your plan, so you'll always have time to top up. No more sneaky roaming fees. No more being stressed out about, oh, I just bought this plan in this weird country that's going to last me for 3 months, but I only need it for 3 days. SAILY has you sorted. And if you're a Submission Radio fan, you can click on saily.com/submission now and get 15% off your first purchase. Or go to saily.com and use the code word submission. Support this show and have the best traveling experience thanks to SAILY. Just a quick reminder while you're watching this interview, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Only 48% of you guys are subscribed. The ones that watch regularly, that really helps. And please click the little bell icon so you get notified when the shows come out. That's going to really help me bring out more content to you, more interviews, and keep the channel around for longer. And now, back to the program. Your final thoughts on Pitbull and this Yair fight, because this thing is crazy. For people that don't know anything about Pitbull, he throws bombs, he can be explosive, he can finish the fight at any time, he's got a great guillotine. But then Yair, outside of, being really fast with his kicks, and is similarly very dangerous. Both men have been beaten by a sub and TKO before, but Yair is only 32 here. Pitbull is 37, so perhaps the age is going to be a factor as we step in here. But to me, Luke, when I look at both of these guys, I just see very sort of similar stories, a lot of similar ways that they could win this fight. Two guys that are very dangerous. I guess the age is the big difference here. What do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, I see it a little bit differently than that. I mean, to answer the question, I want to point out something. Like, there's a list. It's not a very big list, but like, who are the best fighters to have never fought in UFC? And for a long time, the number one answer is, of course, Fedor. Fedor never fought in UFC, but on that list, not far from that, I want to put Patrício Pitbull. Patrício Pitbull, for folks who don't understand this, is by far, like, not even arguable, the best fighter in Bellator history. And I'd be like, oh, what does that mean? Motherfucker, he's good. He's good. I don't give a shit what anybody tells you. He's very good. The problem is he's kind of old. He's 37. That's kind of working against him. But if you're asking how they match up, Yair is going to be fleet of foot and moving a lot and whatnot. Patrício is not that way. Patrício is a step and slider. He's not a big bouncer. He doesn't leap into things like that. He takes his time to set it up. Much better boxing, power in both hands, a dynamite puncher that Patrício Pitbull is, but a guy who, has got a ton of miles on him. I think still pretty durable, but has got a ton of miles on him, but dynamite power. So the question to me is, what range is the fight taking place at? Is Patrício able to crowd him, or is he at the end of the kicks of Yair? Or, how exactly does that all play out? Also, you might be asking, how good is Patrício on the ground? You mentioned his guillotine. Very good guillotine, but overall a comprehensively good game. I just think the highlights would be some of the submissions, the power punching, though. That's where that is where guys live and die on the end of those things. So that's what if you're Yair, that's the number one thing you have to watch out for.
Yeah, he surprisingly catches people off the end of combinations as they move in, even when they have success, and it looks like they might put Pitbull out. Boom, he lands a 1-2 and takes them out. So it's going to be fascinating, and it's actually such a great fight, man. Come on. What a great fight. I can't wait.
Oh, yeah. That whole card, 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10.
I'm so happy we get this fight. All right, man. As we wrap up, you got the big pregame with BC. It's going to be you, BC, Jed. This is going to be huge. Obviously, you've got the Substack, the best Substack, and all the land. And obviously, you got your live watch along. And am I leaving anything out here, man? Obviously, you're absolutely killing it.
That's it right now. Just pay attention to those things and help feed my family. Thank you.
Luke Thomas, go to your daughter. I appreciate you, sir.
Next time, friend.